Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today we have one of our legacy shows, the Pep Talk with John Carl Pepe, the one, the only, the legendary. Greetings, John. How are you?
Excellent, Hercules. I'm doing very well. It's good to see you again this week. Yeah, this is a special addition to the show, breaking from our usual first Sunday of the month to bring a very, very special interview that has been in the works for over a year now. I think this is when I first planted the seed, and it's so happy to have this take root and grow. So we're gonna get right into it. Hercules, as always, thank you as always for giving me this platform and this opportunity. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the interview, or as I like to call it, the Lynne-terview.
There
The
we go.
Lynne-terview.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, folks, yeah, welcome to the Pep Talk. It is Thursday, May the 8th, actually, 2025. And this is a very special show with a very, very special guest that I am so happy to have. But before we get into it really quick, I just want to say there are people who are easy to deal with, and then there are people who are amazing to deal with, and my guest has been amazing to deal with. So I definitely want to thank her for being here. If you've watched this show as recently as this past Sunday, or if you know me in person, you know that I'm a very, very big fan of Andy Kaufman, and I have always been fascinated by his work ever since I was a young child because I was raised on television. And I would watch this guy do things on late night television that I was too young to be up for, but managed to be able to see them. So Andy Kaufman's performances have always been with me ever since I was a kid. And I even remember that day in, May 16th of 1984, being 9 years old and hearing about his passing. And that almost cemented his legacy, I think, in my young mind as somebody who will always remain eternal, always remain pure in this stasis, right? Because it's always tough sometimes when we see our idols get older and change sometimes. So one of the beautiful things about Andy is while you had many very different iterations of Andy that were out there in his career, there is a purity to the fact um, that he will always be locked in amber in that respect. It is tragic that he is no longer with us, that we were not able to see more of his work, but that work still lives on. And in no small part to my guest, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the Pep Talk. Thank you to my guest. I am so proud and so happy to present Lynne Margulies Osgood, ladies and gentlemen. Lynne, say hello.
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 I was going to say, like, if this were an Andy thing, it would now be the end of the show.
Oh,
It'd
that's
be like, welcome and thank you for coming. And
roll
it'd be
credits.
over.
Roll credits, yeah. It's kind of funny because I went back recently to rewatch some things. Man on the Moon. I want to talk to you a little bit about that if we can later on. But one of the things I really love is that movie does state what it is from the very beginning, that it is a fictionalized account of Andy Kaufman's life, and then that point where
Very
Jim
fictionalized.
very, very fictionalized, but that point at the very beginning where Jim Andy goes, I've cut everything out that wasn't true. And so now the movie's over. Let's roll the credits. I always thought that was a great way to open that movie.
I didn't even remember that they opened it that way. I haven't seen it in, God, 20 years.
Yeah, yeah. I guess you know what? Let's just dive right into that right away. But I really want to talk about the new documentary, and then I want to talk a little bit about you outside of Andy World as well, like
What?
we've talked. Yes, you. um, so 1999 was a very fascinating time. It was we were 15 years out from Andy's 35th birthday and Andy's passing, and
And it
these
seemed like a long time then. And boy, now it's 40 years, isn't it?
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's the tough thing. I just turned 50 this year, and yeah, the way time just compresses as you get older. It's very strange.
I
I'm
know it's weird
noticing
because I'm still 25. It doesn't make any sense. It makes
that.
no sense.
It makes no sense.
I don't know
Yeah.
how it happens.
And so when the film is in development, I know Bob Zamuda was a executive producer, co-executive producer on the film. I know you didn't quite get the producer credit, but you were very active and involved in that film in providing context and color. But as we mentioned, they made a lot of different changes to the story. One of the things that I found really fascinating as far as a change, because I get it, you're telling the movie story of Andy, and you have to build things to dramatic effect, and that's why the Carnegie Hall show was the pinnacle of this career while he was sick. And I get that, and I know you love Milos Forman.
I did love Milos.
And I gather from your writings and and how you've spoken about him that really wasn't the problem. I know you're still you still talk to the writers and everything like that. So it seems like you definitely understood what was going on
Oh yeah.
going in. But as far as your, I think meet cute is the phrase that they
My
use.
what?
Your meet cute with Andy.
Meet cute?
Yeah,
What does that
it's a thing
mean?
that they say. It's that moment when two people meet and they click, and it's a meet cute.
Oh, I see.
And it's used a lot in film and television and things like that. So what I think is really interesting is they changed how you and Andy met.
Right.
Um, and yet your actual meeting, your meet cute, is literally it's on film. It is
Yes.
part of a movie.
Yes.
So how did you
Hey, that
feel?
was my brother signed that.
Yes. I've had the opportunity to meet your brother and talk to him a couple times.
Johnny Legend.
Johnny Legend, which brings me to another question. Why did you change your last name?
Which last name? Legend?
Yeah,
Well, I am Lynne Legend
you
too.
are Little Lady Legend.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm Little Lynne Legend. I'm also Lynne Margulies, and I'm Lynne Margulies Osgood. I'm also Zebra Jones. It's nice to have different names and different personas. But to
It
go back
is.
to what you were talking about, the writers Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, who wrote Man on the Moon, they actually told me when I met them. They said we can't really work Breakfast with Lassie into the script, and he met so many women wrestling that we decided just to have him meet you wrestling.
Mhm.
It's like okay.
It's a shorthand. Yeah, there is a big lack of My Breakfast with Lassie. There's like really no mention of it in that movie.
No,
And I get
there's
that.
really no room for it.
Yeah.
It's like that's not what they were doing.
I look at that movie as Man on the Moon. I look at that as almost a placeholder for a certain period of time, because there was a point
That's a
before
good way
you
of looking at it.
before YouTube where that was people's entry point. That's how people knew about Andy. And that's what that was. Now you're at a point 25 years out from the movie, thanks to your work, thanks to Bob's work, thanks to YouTube, that accessibility. You mentioned Man on the Moon and people are like, oh, I think I remember that movie. Wasn't
Right.
that Jim Carrey? Was
I
it a Jim
know. It was
Carrey? Yeah.
25, 26 years ago. It's unbelievable.
Out of the zeitgeist in a lot of ways,
Yay,
in a lot of
yay,
ways.
yay.
But again, it is a way for people to be introduced and to get to know Andy. And as far as like as a biopic, or even if you want to look at it almost as like the Weird Al parody of a biopic that he came out with not too long ago, it's almost like that. It's almost like
Weird Al did a thing on Man on the Moon
no, Weird Al did his own parody of a biopic.
of a biopic. I see.
Yeah, with
Who was it
the
about?
about Weird Al.
Oh, okay.
Daniel Radcliffe plays Weird Al, and
Okay.
it's funny because it plays on all the tropes. His parents are disapproving because he goes to these polka parties in high school with his
Then
friends,
becomes
and
a drug addict. And he's on the
there's that.
streets
There's
and, yeah.
He was killed after he was shot on stage after receiving the award for being great at a very specific genre of music with a very specific instrument is the award he wins at the end of the movie. And then he was killed in 1986, I think, in that movie. It's called Weird. Yeah. And it's a very much a parody of a biopic, sort of like Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story. If you know that one from John C. Reilly. You're not a big television. It's so funny because you are so tied into this world of media and television.
And I don't watch much of, well, we watch a lot of British shows, but yeah, and I never used to watch TV like I didn't even know who Andy Kaufman was when I met him because I didn't watch TV at all.
Yeah.
Ever.
And so really just to finish about Man on the Moon, it's almost like it's almost like Andy Kaufman's idealized version of a biopic of his life to a degree, because you don't necessarily get to know the real Andy. You see him through the eyes of other people.
Go ahead.
George Shapiro is your main, I think, focus as you're meeting Andy through George's eyes. I think Danny had a lot to do with that too.
Oh yeah. Because Danny DeVito played George. But it's like I told Scott and Larry when they're writing it, it's like, I said, I don't know. You guys are going to have trouble writing this because how are you going to portray Andy that's not his act?
Right.
Because he wasn't cinematic at all when he wasn't doing his act. So how are you going to make an engrossing story about this guy without just presenting one act after another, I mean, it's really difficult.
And I think that was a hurdle. And I think that under Miloš's hand, I think that he was able to find those moments of through line in the story.
Well, that's why he added so much drama, because there was no drama in Andy's life.
Exactly.
So Miloš kind of Miloš and the writers swapped things around to try to add a little drama. And I used to keep telling Jim, because he was playing Andy kind of tragic, like he was a tragic figure and I kept saying he wasn't tragic. He wasn't tragic, but they
have more fun.
The drama in.
Yeah, which is interesting because it seemed like Jim did have a little bit of fun. One of my favorite anecdotes from the book that you and Bob wrote, Andy Kaufman, The Truth Revealed Finally, is how Jim would hang out on the Universal lot dressed as Mama Bates in front of the Psycho house.
Fun. We had so much fun. I mean, Jim Carrey was only on the set one time when Andy or Tony was not. It was a day when they weren't needed. So Jim came and visited the set. And that was the only time Jim was on the set. It was either Andy or Tony. It was unbelievable. And I was recording the whole thing. I videotaped 100 hours.
Yeah,
that's the footage they used in the Jim and Andy thing on Netflix, was all my footage. And oh my God, it was so much, especially with Tony. Tony got in so much trouble. Oh my God. We got in so much trouble with Tony. It was such a blast. And I mean, the producer hated me because he knew that because the camera was there, that Jim was just going to act up and act up and act up and cause trouble. And it was just like he hated me, but he couldn't get rid of me because Jim wanted me there with the camera. Oh my God.
I think that there was a lot of magic in the making of the movie. And in that respect, I think it does show in the final product that people were generally having a good time doing this. But you're right. It is a recreation of Andy Kaufman's bits and combining bits, Hang
on just a second. I'm going to be walking while we talk because I gotta go plug my computer in. Oh yeah, let's see. There's Lon over there. Where'd he go? Oh, well. Yeah, I gotta go. Okay. I gotta go plug my computer in.
Sure. So I'll kind of just vamp a little bit.
You guys can walk with me.
Yeah.
I'll try not to trip over anything. You can see my lovely yard back behind me.
Very cool. Yeah, please don't fall or trip or anything. So
no, there's plenty to fall and trip on. We have 14 cats,
Oh my gosh, we only have 3.
Oh God. Only 3. Oh my God.
Only 3. Yeah.
We've never had only 3. We started with 5. And now we're 14.
We've maxed out at 3 twice now, so
yeah. Three is
Yeah.
a good number. Three's actually a good number. But hi, Omar. There's Omar.
For a small apartment in New Jersey, it's a manageable number.
Oh yeah, we have a half acre here, so
That's
okay.
beautiful.
Now I am going to grab my. See how well I'm doing this?
Yeah.
I'm very coordinated. I'm going to grab my thingy. Yeah, you just keep talking. You can talk. It's okay.
So there's some interesting things that they do as far as, yes, just really striving for authenticity to recreate, the bits of Andy and try and give it a dramatic through line. And I was sour on the movie a lot more, I think, a few years ago, but in my rewatching it recently, I kind of found a newfound appreciation for the attempt and what it was trying to do. And I think as a period piece, I think it does a good job of sort of capturing a little bit of what it was like back then to be watching these performances and such. Now,
true. I'll have to watch it again one of these days.
Now, I know that Bob was involved in the casting specifically. He's talked about his meeting with Jim Carrey, where Jim sat him down in the screening room and put all these clips on and said, "Wait a second," and Bob thinking it was Andy and it was actually Jim. And I think it's a really nice, neat story.
That tape was really good.
Yeah, that was the amazing audition tape. How involved in the casting of Lynne were you?
I wasn't at all, and
we lost you a little bit here. Oh,
there's Bird.
Hey.
Bird. You did? Hi there.
Yeah, we got you back.
Okay.
So you said, you weren't really involved at all in the casting.
Okay. No, in fact, Milos just hired, the way it was written, the girlfriend wasn't much of a, but anyway, and Milos loved Courtney because he'd used her in the Larry Flint movie, and he hadn't even met me yet. So I have, if he would have hired someone else after he met me, but who knows?
Who knows?
I don't know.
I thought
he might have.
I definitely felt it was a holdover from that previous collaboration. And I think that he, as a director, I think he got a lot of good things out of her in both performances. And I think that it did that relationship. I think that working relationship I thought worked really well.
Oh, they loved each other. Courtney loved Milos.
Yeah. Well, by all accounts, I mean, he was just a great director to work with. It just seemed to be a lot of fun and a good work ethic as well. Now, one of the things that you mentioned the Jim and Andy documentary, and it's kind of interesting how it feels like every 7 to 8 years there's something new that comes out Andy related. So here we are now with the new Thank You Very Much documentary directed by Alex Braverman, currently screening. And I know you have been at some screenings and doing Q&As afterwards. It's also streaming on various streaming services.
There you go. Okay, we've caught back up.
Okay. Were you able to hear me at all, or?
No, I didn't hear anything. Okay. You froze.
Okay, because you froze for a little bit too, so I wasn't sure. So basically we're now it seems like every 7 to 8 years there's a new Andy project, a new Andy thing.
What I was thinking, 7 to 8 to 10 years. I've always said that. It's like it'll be nothing, and then 8 years later there'll be something, and then another 8 years there'll be something, and then another 8 years there'll be. It's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know if this is why, but it also, I know that copyright is about every 7 to 8 years. So if there's, but also I think as far as being in the public conscious, being in the zeitgeist, I think 7, 8 years is always the good refresher, the good renewal, right?
Yeah, it's like the 7-year itch.
Like the 7-year itch, or how they say every 7 years, every cell in your body is completely regrown, So I think it's a great pace. I think for me, as somebody who consumes this stuff, it's exciting to wait for that next thing, So now
I'm just happy it keeps happening. I am so happy that it keeps happening.
And here we are again with the new documentary directed by Alex Braverman called Thank You Very Much.
Which is the pinnacle of all the things ever done with Andy. I think this is the best.
I agree. I do think that this and this,
well, of course, that
are really good encapsulations of a specific aspect of his life. I thought
blows your mind, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah. I do have to say that I thought when you did this combo,
yes,
what a great idea. What a just to take all the hate mail and to put it out as a book.
Wasn't that wonderful?
I think that was fantastic. Is that when you were making the promise? Was that part of the plan? Was that something
No, it
that
wasn't. It
that was
wasn't.
something
One of the things was the CD you have up behind you, the Andy and his grandmother. He really wanted those tapes to get out. That's one of the things he always wanted to do.
Something like 8,000 hours of recording.
No, it was 80 hours.
80 hours. Okay.
80 hours on those little teeny micro cassettes with really bad quality. So I actually just handed that over to Drag City and let them do it. And Vernon, the guy who plays Towley, you know, on South Park. You're a towel. You're a towel. He's the
I have
one
no idea what's going on.
So he's the one who did that with him, you know.
Yeah.
I just handed it over. I couldn't deal with it.
It makes sense. It makes sense, especially you being more a visual editor as well.
Yeah, plus I was sick at that time. I was sick when we did our book. I was sick when they did that. I had all these autoimmune problems. So I was just like, you guys all do it. You know. I'm better now.
I think it's the attitude. I think it's the sunshiny look on the bright side of life attitude that you do project. Yeah.
That's me.
Now when so when they approached you about Thank You Very Much, were you approached by Alex, the director? Was it the producers? Was it?
It was Alex and his father, Charles Braverman. Now, Charles Braverman had produced the Carnegie Hall show.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
okay.
Alex says Alex grew up with Andy because his parents produced Carnegie Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And Alex always wanted to do something. So what they did was they actually called Zamuda first. And they arranged to come and shoot the interviews with me and Bob at his house in Tahoe. So they did those in 2017. And they used those. They shot them just saying, we're going to use these to try and raise the funds to make this documentary. And then they just disappeared for years. And I thought, well, this is never going to happen. You know, I forgot all about it. And then in 2000, I think it was 22, I get the call from Alex that, hey, we're doing it. We're doing the thing. And so I went to Bob. Bob wasn't there. Bob was living in Chicago at the time. And Bob had from Comic Relief. Mm-hmm. We had collected everything Andy Kaufman had ever done on tape for Comic Relief. And so I went to Bob's house with Alex Braverman and the producer, Lauren Belfer, and we dug out every single tape, which is like 40 boxes worth of stuff. And they took all that. And that's how they made the documentary. A lot of the interviews were done for Comic Relief, like Robin Williams, Gary Shandling, Andy's dad is one that I shot for when we did the A&E biography, you know, so they had all that stuff. And I just said, use whatever you want, just go for it. I trusted him. After I met Alex, I just trusted him to do a really good job, you know, and I left him alone.
And he did an admirable and a really great job.
It
is. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I knew he respected Andy and wanted to do something that was respectful. Mm-hmm. And the thing is what he talked about, he really wanted to try and figure out what made Andy tick, which is the thing no one else ever did in a film, was why did he do the things he did, you know?
And it's neat that he puts a lot of different things out there but doesn't quite land on any specifics, so that you still get
Oh
the
yeah,
sense of
he
the
never
enigma.
answered the question.
You never answer the question. And like you say about unanswered questions in relation to other things in the Andy world, it's more fun to not know. It's more fun to not have that concrete answer and to sort of enjoy the work for what it is, and then play around in your mind with authorial intent and who was he behind the scenes, and was it, was the wrestling again, this desire to be a wrestling villain, this desire to have people fall in love and then turn on him was such a through line. And it's almost like when people realized
Everything he did was wrestling.
yeah. And it's
Every
almost like when people started realize what was going on with Tony Clifton, he didn't have that outlet for people to hate on him anymore. It goes, let's bring it to me. Let's have people hate me, which is such a phenomenal way to sort of arc your career.
But then Clifton's still out there.
And then Clifton's still out there because Tony Clifton is a blessing and a curse.
Right.
As someone who has had the opportunity to see Tony several times, to talk to interview Tony, I've talked to Bob Zamuda. One of my favorite moments was the year before, the Halloween before, I had been Tony for Halloween, and it was at a convention, and something happened. Something changed me, right?
It's like what Bob says, when you're in Tony, you're not you anymore.
Yeah, you talk about that with Marin as well. And Bob and I had that opportunity to talk about that mask is such a freeing thing.
Whoop.
I even oh, hey Kitty. Omar. So I even gave Bob a bunch of pictures of me as Tony from that night. And he goes, just from the pictures, I could see that you got it. And he goes, it warms my heart to see people like you doing Tony Clifton at a Halloween costume. Like it was such a neat moment. But yeah, so that's the thing, that Tony is definitely the sort of eternal thing now. Tony is a brand, right? But yeah, for Andy,
another thing that Andy had made Bob promise to keep Tony alive. He made me promise to keep his work alive and to finish I'm From Hollywood, and he wanted Tony kept alive too.
Yeah. So that's the thing, is that so there's all this. One of the great things about this new documentary was there's all this footage, either little seen or never before seen, that winds up in this documentary, which is really cool. And it gets me thinking as far as how much of that footage is out there that we still haven't seen.
Well, there's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mostly the TV shows and stuff.
Yeah. Because a lot of that is out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's out there, a lot of it, but a lot of it isn't. Yeah. And then there's the stuff like, the black and white footage at the beginning was stuff that Richard Bamer shot back when Andy lived with Richard Bamer back in 1975. And then there's the stuff from the Maharishi, the TM place.
Yeah.
So there's, I mean, like I said, it's 40 boxes of stuff.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
When I met Jerry Lawler, he told me that he has hours of footage that he shot of Andy that no one's ever seen.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
he must mean all that footage from wrestling.
I would think. Yeah, I would think so as well. Yeah.
Yeah, which I have too. I have all that stuff too, because Andy always left with a 3/4 inch tape every time he went to Memphis.
Yeah.
So I think he must mean that stuff.
Yeah,
he never made it on the air.
Yeah. Possibly, I would think so. Yeah, because again, when you're compiling something, like Andy Kaufman, intergender wrestling champion of the world, or I'm From Hollywood, Andy Kaufman, there's only so much time. You can't use all that footage. You
really have to pick and choose.
Yeah. And one of the things that struck me about those, and in your Mark Maron interview that you talked about as well, was at the end, it was just the wrestling and the boxing, and that really was what he was doing in the final year or so.
Well, he wasn't really boxing. That was just one of the characters at the wrestling.
Right.
He wasn't actually boxing. He was just saying that. He was just saying that. But yeah, that's all for the last year. That's all he did
Yeah.
and that's all he wanted to do. That's all he ever wanted to do was be a wrestler.
Had he never gotten sick, what do you think the career path would have been like?
Well, he definitely would have stayed wrestling. Like what he
Mhm.
said was when his career was basically on the skids, he said, well, I guess I'll be a wrestling manager now. So he really wanted to be a wrestling manager. And now with the internet, he would have his own show
Right.
on YouTube. He could just have his own show and do whatever he wanted.
Hmm.
And probably it would have come around where they would have allowed him back on TV again, but he might not have wanted to go back on TV.
Do you think he would have tried to move into more serious dramatic acting, go back to his
No,
roots,
he
like
never,
like
he
like
didn't
God
want
told me to, or
Yeah, he didn't really want to be an actor. But there was one movie he wanted to make, which was a remake of Miracle in Milan, which is an Italian movie, and it's very magical.
huh.
And the main character is very childlike. And Andy was investigating making a remake of that.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it
Interesting.
wasn't because he wanted to be an actor. It's because he loved the movie so much, and it
So
would be a
that,
perfect part for him.
but that's the most honest reason to do a project, to do a remake,
Yeah,
because you love
yeah.
it so
Oh, it's a
much.
wonderful movie, and it turns out that it's one of Milos Forman's favorite movies too. So we watched it together and cried, and said, "Oh, Andy
Oh
could have
man.
made this movie, and Milos could have directed it."
Oh, I'm writing this down. I want to see
Yeah,
this
Miracle
movie.
in Milan. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful movie.
Oh. One of the funny things is that the premiere for My Breakfast with Blassie, which came out just the end of 1983, shortly
It,
after diagnosis, before going to the Philippines, right? Yeah,
yeah, it
yeah.
came out. No, it was the premiere was like the day before we went to the Philippines. So that was 82. No,
It was
84. I'm
84.
sorry.
Okay, yeah.
It was like May of 84
And there's this story that because he had shaved his head into the mohawk, because he was losing his hair, and there was this story
from
because
radiation.
from the radiation treatment, because he didn't want people to know. I remember this being a big thing as a kid. The paparazzi, the National Enquirer photo of Andy
They
in
caught
the
us at the airport.
wheelchair. Got it, yeah. So he was really trying to keep this under wraps.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess there's a story that he was telling people, "Oh, why do you have the mohawk?" He goes, "Oh, because I'm going to be in the sequel to Taxi Driver. I'm going to play Travis
That's
Bickle."
right. I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, yeah,
I'd forgotten that. That's right. You did say that.
yeah.
Wow. I
It was a
forgot
good
all
look. It was a
that.
good look. But so
That is
right
a
up at
good
the
one.
end, what do you think? What do you think the motivation was to not let people know?
Well, you just, when you're famous and you have the whole world looking at you and putting that energy at you, he just didn't want it.
Hmm,
He just didn't want all that energy coming at him. He wanted to be
hmm.
left alone. He didn't even tell his parents at first.
Right, right.
He didn't
Yeah.
even want them to know. He didn't want anyone interfering. He didn't want anyone bugging him about it. And also the thing is when people know, you get bombarded with things like, "Oh, here's this that'll cure you. Here's that that'll cure you." I mean, one of those things was, "Oh, there's these healers in the Philippines that will cure you," and he went, "Okay."
And that was a big phenomenon back then, because even I remember seeing these guys,
We hadn't
on
heard of it.
television, daytime television, doing this stuff,
Yeah.
and and as a as a 8, 9 year old, I thought what I was seeing was real,
Yeah.
and and you could see how somebody could buy into that.
So, like I've said before, Andy had this kind of magical thinking too. And this friend of his told him about this, and he just went, "Okay." And I think a part of him, he never said this, but I think a part of him thought, well, this is one of the weirdest things I could possibly do. I might as well do it.
Mhm.
Like, why not? If you're going to have cancer, why not do the weirdest thing you can possibly do?
Yeah,
But he also believed it. He
yeah.
also believed it.
Well, and again, that kind of tracks with his, transcendental meditation.
Yeah,
The sort of that the duality, the holistic, wanting to live the holistic life,
right.
but also being Tony Clifton, you know, like the sort of the duality of man, or the multifacetedness of man. And that's one of the things I think that I find so fascinating about his work, about his legacy, is that yeah, it really is. What he did was just a study in the human condition, that we all have, you know, these moments where we want to be the hero, and we want to be, here I come to save the day. And then we want to be the villain sometimes. And sometimes we just want to cry, and then have that cry turn into music, you know?
You know, he never thought that way. That's what we in our modern world put on him, thinking that way. He never thought about any of that.
Because as you said, he was just having fun. And I think that that's amazing, because there's a purity to that, that when you're just out there having fun, you stumble on something. And I think that there's the moment that they use, it's such a pivotal, the clip they use is such a pivotal moment in that, in the new documentary. Thank you very much. Is that famous interaction with Howdy Doody.
Oh, it just kills me.
That moment, and Alex does such a good job of putting it where he put it in that movie, because you've just been on that journey, and then it just comes down to, you know,
being a child,
a guy and his idol, whether or not that idol is real or not, but just being that purity of a child and just expressing that. And it is probably the most real moment that we get of Andy Kaufman in that documentary.
It's true. That is real. And also when he's talking to Tom Cottle, the guy with the afro kind of thing, you know, he did that in late '83 too. And he had a cold. So he was just like, just being honest. He was just like, he couldn't bother not being honest. So that interview, he's very honest.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
But I agree with the Howdy Doody thing. It's just like, it's so close to Andy's soul, seeing him there.
And if you watch this documentary and you get to that moment and that doesn't move you, you are an inhuman monster. There's no doubt about that.
I tell you, you know, lately I was down in LA doing the screenings for the opening, right? And I had to get up at the end of the film and do Q&As. And you know, the Howdy Doody thing is at the end of the film. So I'm sitting there, tears coming down my face, and they're going, "Come on up, Lynne." I'm like, "Oh my God." You know, I'm trying to stop crying as I'm walking up to do the Q&A. Yeah, it's a killer.
And yeah, so you've been doing a lot of these Q&As, and you have said that this has been an amazing experience for you, because it really feels like you're bringing him back to people.
Well, plus I wrote this to Alex and Lauren, the director and producer, just a few days ago. And I thank them, because I can finally acknowledge to myself that I have fulfilled my promise to Andy to get his work out in the world, you know? And I mean, because this documentary, it not only goes into who Andy was and why he did it, but it's got all of his performances in there. So you get all of his performances and all the things he did. And I was never able to get all of that out into the world. You know, back, I don't know if you even know this, back in the 90s, was it 90s? No, it's early 2000s. I was putting out homemade DVDs and selling them on eBay.
You talk about, I know, because you were talking about this on Mark Maron, and it's the 2-volume Andy Kaufman archives, which
Andy Kaufman files, I call
Kaufman files, yeah. And it's funny because I stumbled upon those, I think, on Amazon a decade or so ago. Currently unavailable. I had no idea that was you. So I've been I would check on a weekly basis to see if they would come back into stock.
I only made about 100 of each.
Yeah.
You know, and I sold them on eBay, and it was so cute. I typed up a little story and I signed it. And so each one had an insert, you know, with my signature and the story about it. And it was just my way of keeping Andy's stuff out there, you know, like.
That's great. That's great.
And now eBay, you can't do that. It has to be a real DVD, but these were just, I had them pressed. They were replicated. They were duplicated. They weren't replicated. You know, it was just, they were just homemade DVDs.
And that's, you know, and that's the other thing too, is that, you know, again, there was a period where you had to do that. There was a period where you were reliant on like Rhino Video putting out the Andy Kaufman show or the Midnight Special stuff.
Right.
You know, the other thing too, it's like that the way things have changed, you know, where back, you know, back then, you know, Andy was very private, didn't want people to know he was sick. Nowadays you'd have somebody on TikTok every day. Oh, this is where I'm at with
Oh,
my
yeah.
treatment, and you know,
Which,
and
which if the internet had existed back then, he probably would have done that.
well, that's sort of that's
probably
yeah,
would have done that.
because that's also pulling touch my celebrity cyst, you know,
Exactly.
that's sort of pulling that from his oeuvre, right? So again, he was able to do so much and so many different things that people have been able to pull so many different things. Look, you know, in the Barron interview, you mentioned our current president, and you talk about that meme from the first term of the unzipping Trump and Andy Kaufman stepping out, and
Yeah, which I can't find now.
right. But it, you know, it's so weird because there's a closeness geographically and in age that this whole thing that this guy does is very reminiscent of that, of being different sides of different things and saying things just to get a rise out of people, and then, oh, you didn't like that, well, okay, then fine, we're not going to do that, you know, like,
Right, right.
I know that there's, if you go way far out into the Andy Kaufman is still alive fringes, there are people who are convinced that that's who he became, you know.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
It
And
would,
I just wanted to say the thing that I love now about is Andy Kaufman's still alive, because for years and years and years I would not say one way or the other.
yeah,
And then I realized a few years ago that it doesn't matter what I say, because who knows if you can believe me.
right.
So now if someone says, is he dead? I go, yeah, he's dead. But what if I'm not telling the truth?
I like that, because you say in the, I mean, you say in the book, you say, look, I was there when he died. I
Right.
firmly am, you know, in this camp. But you always allow a little bit of ground. You always give a little bit of ground. You said something on Facebook to somebody the other day. They said, what were Andy's last words? And you go, there were no last words,
Right.
which on first read is incredibly crushing and heartbreaking. And then because I'm a big firm believer in the 80%, 20%, 80%, but that 20% is fun to play with, right? It's just fun
Yeah.
to think about.
And it
And
doesn't
that
matter
20,
what I say anymore.
and that 20% was like, perfect answer. That could be interpreted as such an open answer, you know? And I thought that
Right.
was brilliant, you
You
know?
just won't say.
Yeah. Well, you know, and I think that the whole Andy lives again, like Man in the Moon, it's just a tool to keep the story going until something like this documentary comes along, or something like YouTube comes along where we have access to all that stuff. You know, I think it was a great hook. It was a great tool to keep that going. Sure. Do I want to live in a world where Paul McCartney, the original Paul McCartney, is dead and Andy Kaufman is still alive? Sure. But I know that's not the case. But it's fun to play with, you know.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it
So
frees me up now, because once I realize that it doesn't matter what I say, people will decide what they want to decide. It has freed me up.
I definitely want to talk a little bit about the things that you have done over the last several decades that aren't Andy related. First and foremost, I mean, talk about working with icons. You were in the aftermath with Sid Haig.
Yes, I was. I was with Sid Haig. Yeah, I
So,
know.
so
I've always been very proud of that.
there's the remaster they did recently. It looks great. It actually looks really good.
They did something recent because, the director just died last year.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think it was like,
died last year.
I think I saw some HD remaster about 7 years ago or so that
Oh,
it
so
just
he's still alive
looks
then.
pretty
Yeah.
clean. Yeah, it looks really clean. So that you intended to be an actress.
No,
I think
no,
you never intended to be an actress.
no, it just happened. I met that guy. because he co-owned Hollywood Book and Poster Company with my friend Eric Caden. And I met him and he just was making the film and he said, "You want to be the lead actress?" And I went, "Okay," the way I do. "Okay."
Huh.
No, I never wanted to be an actress. He just wanted me in the film.
Yeah. Sort of like how you wound up in My Breakfast with Blassie. You were
Yeah,
there seeing your
that
brother, and then they were like, "What? Have breakfast."
Yeah.
And then boom. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then I meet Andy there. Yeah. No, I always just wanted to be an artist, which is what I've done for the last 30 years. I went to school, got my master's degree, been teaching art. I taught art for like 25 years. And I mean, that's all I ever really wanted to do.
What's your preferred medium?
Well, I now do mixed media, but I started as purely an oil painter. Then I went into mixed media, and lately I've been doing sculpture.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah. So
my mom did a lot of abstract expressionism, oil, acrylics when I was growing up.
I'm not an abstract. I'm so trained in realism. I have trouble breaking out of it. I'm a really good realist.
That's how she started, and then 4 kids and a divorce turned her mind.
Yeah. I have trouble being abstract because I'm so just deeply trained, and
So one of the things that I love about you and the connection you had with Andy is that at a young age you were very into wrestling as well because of your brother Johnny. Yeah. And
from time I was a little kid, he used to take me to the Olympic Auditorium to see Fred Blassie. I met Fred Blassie when I was like 6 or 7 years old.
That's awesome. That's amazing. and so again, Andy lived in that world of wrestling as well. But again, that's a world populated of good and evil, battles being played out in a forum. Did you, or even Andy by an extension, have any interest in traditional comic books, which, wrestling is basically live action comics before that? Because I know Andy in his SNL audition does that yokel Superman intro.
Right. But he also did the one they didn't run was MacArthur Park.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
He read MacArthur Park. So no, he was never into comic books.
Okay, interesting.
Just wrestling.
Yeah.
Just wrestling.
And as an artist, the medium, that type of medium, the sequential art never really appealed to you.
To me, no. I'm a painter.
Yeah. Have you had a chance to read things like, was it Box Brown did the graphic novel?
I heard about it and I forgot about it. I heard about it and forgot about it. Was it about Andy?
Yeah. It's Was This Guy for Real? It's a follow-up because he did a graphic novel comic book biography of Andre the Giant. And so he followed that up with the Andy Kaufman Was This Guy for Real? And it's really neat. It's a very simple, cartoony style. Again, it's somebody doing their best to chronicle Andy's career.
Can you send me a link to it? Or
just
to remind me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, totally. Just kind of doing his best to sort of chronicle and give a through line. And that's one of the interesting things too. It's very hard to find, or to really nail down a timeline, especially in the years that you're with him, because so much happened in such a short amount of time.
I know. And before I was with him. When you think here he was, like everyone has said, there he was being the struggling comic, and all of a sudden he's on TV and this huge star out of nowhere because he got Taxi.
Yeah. Which was a blessing and a curse, as famously
because
known.
Exactly. So he could do all the stuff he wanted to do because he was famous.
Yeah. Now, when Taxi was canceled, I know it was a big relief for him, but he also did another pilot that never got picked up or aired. And again, doing the Latka type character, but I think as a robot in the future or something.
Oh no, that's a movie.
Well, that was Heartbeat. No, that's right. Heartbeat was a movie. But
you're thinking, no, that other thing was done, I think, before. It was called, what was it called? I can't remember what it was called.
I can't remember either. Yeah.
I do know it, but I'm getting forgetful.
But that was before Taxi.
I think so. That wasn't after, because I was with him when Taxi was canceled. They didn't do that after Taxi, but he did go out for a reading. I mean, George Shapiro was sending him out. George didn't know what to do with him after that, you know. He sent him out on something with 3 guys who were going to be lifeguards, you know.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm
Oh,
like,
wow.
you know, and Andy was just like, I don't want to do this stuff. I don't want to be on TV anymore.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I was wondering, because I thought that was after, and I said, why would he do that? You know, but I know, like, even at the end, he was working, he did a Top of the Pops, I think his last television
Well, that
appearance,
was called The Top.
or The Top.
And that
Yeah.
was it was a thing for MTV. They were going to have it be, you know, an MTV thing. And I don't think that ever went anywhere,
Yeah.
but
But
they just had him come in and host it. It was
but
just a job.
he was sick during that time.
Yeah, he
You
was.
you can tell.
Yeah,
He
that was
doesn't
in
use
January.
he doesn't use his left arm. It's
Yeah, his
sad.
left arm
Yeah.
had the tumor. Yeah, but
Yeah.
still no one knew. We didn't tell anybody.
That's
And I
amazing.
remember
That's
my job was to stand next to him so no one would touch his arm, you know?
right, right, right. It's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
So we only have a little bit of time left. So I do want to talk a little bit about your album Howl from a few years
Oh,
ago.
how
You are married to musician Lon Osgood.
yes.
I have a feeling that the music side of you was encouraged by him, and he helped with
Yeah,
the
you
album.
know, yeah, I always loved singing, but back before I was taking anti-anxiety medicine, I was too shy to sing. But now that I'm not shy anymore, I love singing. So yeah, that was so much fun. We did it here at the house because we have a recording studio, and every song is written by a friend of ours. So every song is written by a friend, and if we could, we had that friend sing with me, you know.
Cool.
So each song, that's why all there's different people singing with me, because they wrote the songs.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, so it was fun. It was fun.
And you and Lon will be celebrating 15 years married.
Let's see. We got married. God, you're right.
Yeah.
15 years.
Hey,
Unbelievable. I've never been with anybody longer than like 7 years.
Same with me and my
And
wife.
we still like each other.
Yeah, it's same. It's amazing. Yeah, I do my research occasionally, which is good,
You
especially for this
do.
one.
You know all about me.
How did you guys meet?
Well, it's interesting because Lon and my brother Johnny Legend met in high school.
Okay.
So I've known Lon since I was 7 years old
Hmm.
because, you know, they started the band Seeds of Time together. And
Okay.
so they would rehearse at our house, and Lon was always over at our house. So he was just like family. And then through the years, everyone has stayed friends, and, you know, we'd see each other here, we'd see each other there. And then 2009, we saw each other and went, oh. But I've known him since I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
Which I love because he knows my crazy family. He was good friends with my brother. He knew my mom and dad, you know. I don't have to explain anything to him.
Isn't that interesting? You know, my wife and I, we met and knew each other in high school, but we were never involved. It wasn't
Yeah.
until later that we re-met.
Which is good, I think, because you're too young to have a relationship back then.
But also to have somebody with just the exact same frame of reference, you know, that we can, I can reference something and she'll know, or I could be like, oh, this person from my past, and she's like, she knows. It's a great shorthand for a relationship.
Very relaxing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for me, the clincher for her, that she was the one, was in 2009, this weird New Jersey article comes out about this Andy Kaufman press conference that some guy put on in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and written by Chris Gethard, who went on to do a bunch of stuff. He had his own really quirky live television show for a while. But I had picked it up. I had picked up the magazine, and she got to read it first. We were just started dating. She goes, you have to read. Do you remember this guy that was on the show Taxi? I used to watch his bits when I was a kid with my dad, and this whole thing. And I was like, you are an amazing woman, because you know, and that is huge. That was huge for me. This is,
you know, that's how Andy first fell in love with me. Is he was at my apartment, you know, we had just met. Well, it was after Breakfast with Blassie, but he was at my apartment, and he he pulled up his socks and blew into his socks. And I knew that was from a W.C. Fields film called Man on the Flying Trapeze. And so I went, why is the maternity hospital calling you in the middle of the night? And his eyes lit up like, oh my God, she knew what I was doing. I think that's the moment he fell in love with me.
Oh, that's wild. And weird coincidence, she just had surgery this year, which she's doing really well. She's full recovery, but that surgery was actually on January 17th this year.
And I don't know if people know this. I guess it's finally okay for me to say this, but Bob Zamuda needed a kidney, and I gave him my kidney. And our
Wow.
surgery was on January 17th
This year?
of 2022.
2022. Okay.
2023,
23.
January.
Okay.
And it had been rescheduled because he'd gotten COVID, then I had gotten COVID. So it got rescheduled 2 times. The third time they said, okay, we're doing it on January 17th. And I'm like, oh my God. It's like do 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 do.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
wild.
that was
That's
amazing.
Well, I honestly, I felt that that day was appropriate, even though David Lynch had passed away the day before. There was a very weird Lynchian moment in the library when the receptionist goes, looking for Judy, and she goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean looking for Judy. If you know Twin Peaks, you know that reference." But she had made a
That's
mistake,
right.
and in my head, I was like, "Whoa, well, we're not here to talk about Judy. How's Sherry doing?" So, but I felt that being that day, I felt she was in good hands. I thought that was a good
Yeah,
omen.
it's a magical day.
So,
It's definitely a magical day.
unfortunately, this is all the time we have. We're
Yep,
gonna have to
we're
wrap
out of
it up.
time.
But Lynne, I would love to have you on again if you were ever amenable. If you ever want to do one of the roundtables that we just did one on Sunday, or if
Sure,
you
this
ever,
is fun. Now that I've met you and I know you're not a nut.
I am still a nut,
No, you're a
but
nut, but you're good. I mean, when you first contacted me, I was like, I don't know who this guy is.
well, I appreciate you for taking this chance and for trusting me that I wasn't going to be a nut, and that you were so great to deal with throughout all of this. I have some guests that I swear, this guy Stuart Hirsch, she's on twice a year.
I've met him.
I think you know him. He says hi. Every 6 months, I get a 6-page rider from this guy of conditions and terms that I have to adhere to. So you were a doll. You were fantastic.
That's funny.
I'd love to, and look, to be honest, this is like the biggest interview I've ever done. The Tony Clifton one I did back in 2011 was great, but this is and I want you to know that now that I'm going to be a big star, that my star is going to rise.
That's right.
I won't forget about
You won't
you.
forget me.
Everybody
As
else,
you go up the ladder.
but I'm not coming down, so I don't have to be nice to anybody else except for you, Lynne. I will always appreciate this. I will always appreciate what you do to turn Andy Kaufman into truly living mythology. Because as long as his work is out there, as long as these documentaries are getting made, as long as people are rediscovering his stuff, it's all thanks to you and of course Bob. But I think you carried the torch a lot further than a lot of others were willing to do. And but yeah,
in my mission.
Well, mission accomplished, man, because you know what? Andy Kaufman might not be alive, but Andy Kaufman lives.
But he's alive. Yeah, but he lives.
And I thank you very much.
Aw, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here.
And we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Love it.
Thank you both for an awesome show, and I'm looking forward to the next one. And I wish you success, both of you, in all your endeavors.
Thank you, Hercules.
Or are we supposed to talk to him? Thanks, Hercules.
Yes,
Hercules.
He's an accessible demigod. So.
Nice meeting you and learning about you. You're a very interesting person.
Who, me? Thanks.
Thank you, folks.